Throughout the 1960s, I was very isolated as a woman artist and very embattled. And I turned to the past, and I discovered that by looking at other women's lives, I found a certain kind of nourishment and a certain kind of resonance that amplified and explained the experience I was having. The more I studied, the more I realized that there was this huge body of information, an enormous amount of richness in women's heritage, and that not only I, but most people knew nothing about it. Can you see something? 86 years, man. 50 years of holding firm. Can you believe that? That woman stood firm for 50 years. This book knocked me out. Just knocked me out. There's this, the woman, Susan B. Anthony, the woman who changed the mind of a nation. In 1893, there convened in Chicago the World's Congress of Representative Women, the first in the world to assemble. And of the 150,000 who passed the gates, not one but who demanded to see and hear the woman whose name was known, all unsuspected by Americans, the world over, Susan B. Anthony. On days when she was advertised to speak, a squad of police had to be sent to keep the corridors from a dangerous jam. I love this. And it required 2 stout policemen to get Susan through the crowds to the platform and afterward out of the building to her carriage. When she rose to speak, men and women climbed on their seats, threw hats and handkerchiefs into the air, and cheered themselves hoarse before she could utter a word. After 50 years of poverty, misrepresentation, abuse, vilification, Susan, as poor at 73 as she had been at 30, was lifted into the ranks of the immortals. Can you believe that? And then just right out of history.
Yeah.
One thing I learned from my studies of history was that even though women achieved, those achievements would be erased the next decade, the next generation. I wanted to challenge that process, to end that process, to honor those achievements, and to introduce them into the society through a work of art that would symbolize our heritage so that those achievements could never be erased from history again. I'm Susan Hill, head of needlework at the Dinner Party Project. The Dinner Party is a large, open, triangular table. It is 48 feet on a side. There are 39 place settings at the table, 13 on each side. Each of the place settings represents a woman of achievement from Western civilization. At every place setting, there is a porcelain china-painted plate which represents the woman. The plate rests on a large, elaborately embroidered cloth that we call a runner. The whole table sits on a porcelain floor that's composed of about 2,300 triangular tiles. There are 999 names of women of achievement written in gold across this floor. It took 5 years to complete the dinner party. For the first year and a half, Judy worked alone in the studio, and then she realized she needed help. Over 400 people came from all over the United States, from as far away as Australia, to work on the project. In 1976, I went to New Orleans to see the International China Painting Convention because I wanted to buy supplies there and see the work that was being done. How long have you been China painting?
Oh, about 30 years.
30 years. How did you happen to get interested in it?
Well, My doctor advised it.
Really? He advised you
Yeah.
to China paint?
Yeah.
Specifically?
Well, I was in an accident, and I needed to use my hands very bad.
Was there a teacher there you could learn from, or did you have to teach yourself?
We started out by ourselves. Then we had a teacher that we taught the teacher.
And can you tell me something? So how much time a day? Do you work every day?
No.
A few times a week?
Yes, definitely.
Definitely.
Don't put it aside because you have to start all over again.
Okay, thanks a lot.
It always stays on the table, so sometimes you have to clean the table off in order to have another table to eat off
Oh, you mean
of.
you always leave it on the table?
Sure.
And then you just go to it whenever you can?
Sure.
Uh-huh. Thanks a lot. It meant a lot to me that Rosemarie Ren, who's a very well-known China painter, became a good friend of mine. She helped build a bridge between me and the traditional China painters.
When you first started and found an interest in China painting, would you walk by a pretty rose plate?
Well, the first China painted piece I ever saw was a pretty rose plate.
Did you like it?
Well, yes. I mean, that's what attracted me. Now, the question is absolutely appropriate, but backed up a little ways, which is a few years before that, I would never have been able to look at a rose plate and
Right.
have responded to it. Because one, wouldn't have been art. Two, it was decorative. Three, I had all these stereotypes about little old lady China painters.
Right.
You know,
we're changing
all
that.
Okay. So then I began to think about my plates and how I was going to put them on the wall, because that's what paintings were, you know, you hung paintings on the wall. So then I started thinking about setting them on a table. And that, of course, made me think about the Last Supper. You know, except I knew I was like doing this thing, well, you know, at the Last Supper, the men sat down to eat off plates, you know, and I was going to make these women on plates. So it was like an image of consumption, you know, being consumed as opposed to being the one who consumes.
We didn't know how high or how wide the table had to be. So in July of 1976, the first summer of the project, we built a mock-up of the corner to figure out scale and proportion.
Probably prouder of the work we have done on Byzantium, on women in Byzantium, than on anything else we have done in the whole project. And we have found out there was a long tradition of very strong and powerful women in Byzantine, that women were had a lot of rights, partly because of Theodora, who was incredibly concerned about women. Mm-hmm. She, for example, made rape subject to the death penalty. Mm-hmm. She drastically altered the status of women in the culture. She had all these laws passed to give women property rights, educational rights. She ended prostitution. Women were forced into prostitution. She made procuring a crime. She established houses for women to change their lives if they didn't want to be prostitutes anymore. Her influence lasted almost 500 years. You know, and this is the kind of woman who then gets totally distorted. Why? Because she was on the side of women. Down the line on the side of women.
It took a research team in the studio about 2 years to accumulate the 3,000 names from which the 999 were chosen.
I'll tell you a marriage ceremony in Sparta. In Sparta, the woman was abducted or carried off by the bridegroom. And then she was taken to a place where there were other women who would prepare her for the actual consummation of the marriage. And they would cut her hair short so that she looked like a man. And they dressed her in men's clothing. And then they put her in this dark room on a mattress. And she laid there. Okay. Meanwhile, her husband is out drinking and having dinner with his male friends. And then he sneaks away. So he goes to this room. He finds his way in. And then he consummates the marriage with the woman. In some cases, they never even saw the face of the woman in daylight until after the first children had been born.
We could only afford salaries for 3 of the key people. Everybody else worked without pay. Work schedule in the studio was 6 and 7 days a week, all the time. We worked from early in the morning till quite late at night. Thursday nights were special. Then we got together for a potluck dinner, invited in guests to speak, or used the time to work out studio problems.
I think feminism is a philosophy that says that every human being's life experience has meaning and has value. And that feminist thought challenges the assumptions of whose experience is important. That is the experience of those people in power more important than those people out of power? And the symbol for all that is women. Room of One's Own, Sisterhood is Powerful, and Dialectic of Sex. How many people read all 3 books? All. Did you all really want to know about feminism? Did you really want to talk about feminism?
Why are you pissed?
Because you wanted to talk about feminism for 2 weeks and you won't even do the fundamental work.
Well, I feel like we're all going to study and understand it, but nothing will be done.
They haven't done it.
When they made political changes like Marxist changes, that everybody went around all reading books.
The people who actually formed and caused the revolution absolutely goddamn well knew Marxist theory.
All right.
I would like to give you a little input. They have study groups.
Yes.
In China, they have study groups. They have consciousness-raising groups. They read theory. They read Mao. They read Marx. They read Lenin. And it is based on understanding theory and understanding their own oppression and linking the two together that caused the change. And that is the history of Western thought. And one of the things that you talk about my being angry, one of the things I'm really angry about with women is how fucking ignorant women not only are, but insist upon being. Yes. It's like you say, how do I make change? And we tell you, and you say, oh, I don't want to do all that. That won't make change. And we say to you, those of us who are effectively making change are not ignorant. Those people who have ever made change in the history of the human race were not ignorant, and nobody who's ignorant will ever make change, which is one of the reasons that women have such a fucking hard time. Women are fucking ignorant. And we have to take responsibility for it and face it and accept it and do something about it. We are building support structures. There is a whole history of thought that helps us stop being ignorant, and we have to take responsibility to understand and change ourselves and prepare ourselves for a real task. Otherwise, it is total, unbelievable fantasy. It's like women's fantasies about being artists. There are women in the studio who do not have the slightest notion of what being an artist is, but they have this fantasy. They're artists. They're going to be artists. That is one of the reasons women are not able to translate their aspirations into reality, because they are embedded in remaining ignorant. And it pisses me off.